All right. All right, everybody. Just please remember the notes that Valerie shared. We want you to feel comfortable in this space. We don't want you to feel uncomfortable at all. If you want to leave your cameras off, you want to put another name, that's fine. Listen, at any time, if we are Zoom bombed, I know that's still a thing. We need to be very aware of that. If that happens, then we will immediately shut down this Zoom. If there's anything that is foul that enters in, we will shut down this Zoom and then restart it back up again. And so just come on back in the space, knowing that we have handled the issue and restarted it, but know that we will instantly shut it down. All right. Again, this conversation is meant to engage us, to give us education on what exactly we're dealing with right now. We see it, we hear it. It is a part of our lives every single day. We are affected by it, and so we have invited three panelists on tonight to talk. Four panelists, I'm sorry, to talk with us about what exactly is going on. And so we have with us Jeff Thomas. We have with us Dr. Rafael. We have with us Angela. I mean, sorry, Rachel Tabor, and we have Miss Angela Davis. And so we're going to have them speak one by one, each for about 7 to 10 minutes each. And during that time, they will give us education, and also you can leave any notes or comments or questions in the chat. So first tonight, I want to welcome my dear friend Jeff Thomas. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm great, Pastor. How are you tonight?
I am fantastic. I got my sweater on in my office, so I'm good.
That's good. So where are you? Did I hear you say you're in Miami?
No, 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 no.
Oh,
Our administrator for Justice and Beyond is
ah,
in Miami. So
okay. You're at your church. I
yeah,
recognize your office. There you go. I was going to
yeah,
say you got a duplicate office there.
yeah, yeah. No, no. Kiana's in Miami. She got 79 degrees weather.
Oh,
I think,
she's
yeah.
living the life.
Yes. But listen, Jeff, tell everybody first who do not know you. I'm sure most people do, but if you just begin by introducing yourself and telling about your work in the city and particularly Think 504.
Sure. Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. It's great to be back with Justice and Beyond. I see a lot of faces and names that I recognize, some that I don't. But my name is Jeff Thomas. I am the publisher and editor of Think 504, Black Source Media. It is the third largest website in our region. We get over 1 million hits a month. We publish articles or op-ed articles on Mondays, and on Thursdays, we also publish kind of self-help relationship articles. I just believe that if people are informed, know more, then they can do more. And if people have better information, then they can live better lives. So that's what we try to do. We try to look at the analysis and analyze what's going on in our world around us. And so, that's kind of what I do. I also own three radio stations. One of them is WBOK, which is the oldest black-owned radio station in the state of Louisiana, third oldest in the country. And that's another platform where we produce black-centric content. And so that's kind of me in a nutshell. Now, did you want me to talk about this article I wrote, or how do you want me to?
Yeah, yeah, Jeff. But yeah, particularly, when you talk about black centric content and how that applies, and Act 399, SB 15, all of that in the context that the question that I think that, as I said in the beginning, many people are wondering about is whose fight is this? Who really should be on the front lines? And as you know, I try to get out there and make my voice known as often as possible. And I don't see a lot of chocolate brothers like me that are out there, or sisters, or people that are just African American in general that are in the fight. Is there a reason for that? I want you to talk about that, and what do you think are the concerns that are surrounding African American people in particular when we think about engaging in this particular fight as far as getting out in the street?
Yeah, that's multi-layered, Pastor. Number one is, I think part of the reason that I go to protests a lot too, and I see not a lot of black people participating. I think one of the reasons is that too often black people are engaged in providing for their families. They have to go to work. They don't have the free time. They don't have the means to participate in protests. Now, there's also another layer, and that is I was talking to a really good friend of mine today who said, you know what? This is not our fight. This is not our time. This is other people's fight. This is their time to participate. We're going to kick back, sit back, and watch, and let the dust settle and let the chips fall where they may. And that, and then there's another group that is actually happy about seeing the torture and pain. I don't want to say happy, but they are well, I think they're happy it's not the black community, and there's this dichotomy, this dissension between the African American and Hispanic communities, I think, based upon a lot of different things. And so I talked to a lot of black people who say, well, Hispanic people come over here, they don't want to align with black people, they want to align and associate with white people, they don't want to align with the black cause or resistance, they want to align with white supremacy, and to the extent that they can position themselves in some pecking order above black people, and so that you have this contentious relationship that exists. And so I'm putting out there, I think, all kinds of seeds about reasons why you don't see as many black people out participating. And then additionally, you just have black people who just aren't concerned, just living their lives, partying and living la vida loca kind of stuff. But, that happens with black, white people, Hispanic people too. But I think that that kind of lays the groundwork for why there aren't that many black people out there. Some people just don't want to participate. Some people don't think it's our fight. Some people just aren't interested in fighting. And some people are just living their lives. Kind of, that's it.
Mhm.
So,
Right, right, right. Yeah. If you so this hostility,
mhm.
because do you think that particularly is that nationwide, or is it particular to New Orleans that we see that maybe that the communities are not aligned with each other?
Well, I'm not in every place in the community in the nation, but I can tell
Yeah.
you places that I visited, Houston, Los Angeles, Miami, there's definite disconnect between African American and Hispanic communities for some of the reasons that I laid out earlier, which is that sometimes African Americans feel as if the Hispanic community doesn't support the African American cause, that when black people are out suffering every day, that Hispanics don't see it as their cause, don't see it as their fight. And as a result, I think that you build this wedge between the communities. Also, as people fight for their ability to survive in America, there was this whole notion that Hispanic men were coming and taking black jobs, that kind of stuff. I mean, there are all kinds of economic factors associated with this dichotomy, with this dissension.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a social, I think it's economic, and I think there's just some cultural differences that, people don't align themselves all the
Mm.
time.
And Jeff, you're I'm sure some people know, but you're a political guy who is in that arena. It does the results of how many people were thought to have many Hispanics were thought to vote. Does that have anything to do with it? That um,
Sure,
yeah.
sure. So look, I hear so many black people. I go to the barber shop and they say, yeah, so those Hispanics who vote for Trump, now look at them. Now they're getting deported. And where is it now? And so there's this dismissive, aha, now you see what you get. Now you voted against your own interests and now you got it. I think that, what was your question again? I got distracted
Yeah.
looking
So
at
see, yeah, no, I got you. And there's probably questions coming in through the chat, but
right.
yeah, but you hit the nail on the head. So black folks may not get involved because you're saying you got what you
Sure.
deserve
Yeah,
because
you
you
voted for
voted for this
Trump.
guy.
You
Yeah.
wanted Trump, and now you get what you get, and as a
Hmm.
result of your actions. And so you have to take responsibility for your actions in this world. And to the extent that there was I think it was 30% of the Hispanic community voted for Trump, and less than 10% of Black people voted for Trump. So you see that there's a big difference in the tr association with Trump. So I think, and the Hispanic community that supported Trump was out there, was, you know, vivacious, not vivacious, that's a bad word, was, they were, out there, and it was clear,
Outspoken, maybe.
outspoken,
Yeah.
thank you,
Hmm.
that's what I want to say.
Hmm.
They were clear about their position, and they were happy to be strong supporters of President Trump, which, that wasn't the case for most African Americans. And so there you see some more dichotomy.
Yeah, yeah. So linking this back to the article that you wrote that is in Think 504, and maybe somebody will post it here. Can we broaden this out and say this is a larger issue that ultimately does affect Black folks in ways people may not realize just yet, but it does ultimately lead back to
Oh,
serious implications for Black folks.
Oh, absolutely, Pastor. So listen, Act 399 is about building a bigger cage. And so, it is changing the dynamics of law enforcement. It is broadening the powers of police departments. It strips local governments of their local control. It is a way for uh, African American, I mean, for the government to broaden its reach on how it can interact with people. What it does, it is a real crime. I'm sorry, I got distracted. Somebody walked in. What it does is it changes the way the the government can interact, or people can interact with police departments. For
And
example,
Jeff, let me stop you. For those who don't know, can you define? I mean, I know you're doing it a little bit right now, but what exactly is Act 399? What's it exactly?
sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Let me read to you what it says. Well, in essence, Act 399 expands policing authority, shrinks civil rights, and overrides local control. The law makes it a crime for any person to hinder, delay, interfere, or prevent federal immigration enforcement. And so on its face, that doesn't sound that bad, but if you think about what it means, it actually means things like filming ICE officers, standing too close to a police operation, warning neighbors that ICE is nearby, offering food, water, shelter, transportation to Hispanic people, being a local observer, chanting or marching in protest, and refusing to move too quickly um, when an ICE officer gives a command, it changes dramatically how people can interact with ICE in Louisiana. And as we saw what happened we all tragically, I'm sure, saw the tragic events that happened in Minnesota. It gives complete immunity to ICE officers here in Louisiana. And also, it makes it illegal for police departments in Louisiana to not support ICE officers. In Minnesota, they're talking about they want to investigate ICE. In Louisiana, police departments are required to support ICE officers. Jails are required, sheriffs are required to support ICE officers. That is the law in the state of Louisiana. And so you would have seen in Louisiana, we are fortunate. ICE was here recently, and there's still, some vestiges of it around town, a couple of people here and there. But when they were here, we didn't have any of the dramatic, tragic consequences that we saw in Minnesota. But, you know, I think it was because people in Louisiana recognized that this Act 399 really criminalized intervention by citizens. I mean, you couldn't be doing the things that people in Minnesota are doing without being rounded up and arrested. It was a way for the state of Louisiana to control the population. That's the difference between what you saw in Minnesota and how ICE was able to have free reign here in Louisiana, here in New Orleans. They could do whatever they wanted, and the citizens were hands off because of Act 399. Just filming potentially could have gotten you arrested. If you didn't move fast enough, you could have gotten arrested. And we see now that ICE takes no prisoners. I mean, they're killing, you know, for no real reason, it seems to me. I mean, and so when you are in Louisiana and you are faced with this law, then you have to ask and question, how do I engage? Should I engage? Can we march? If we march, do I go to jail? I think Governor Landry and the hyper conservative state legislature got ahead of the game, and as a result, we saw ICE come, like a whirlwind, arrest a bunch of people and move on. But in Minnesota, where the laws are different, where the reaction of the government is different, where you have a Democratic governor and you have a Democratic citizen, I mean, a Democratic mayor, then, the reaction was far different. And as a result, we're seeing the results of what happened. Some might say that we're lucky in Louisiana because we had this law and we didn't have these deaths. But that's certainly not my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. As we wrap this up, and that was very good. I appreciate that framing of it. Um, but the ultimate question then is this: as an African American, is this our fight? Should we? Of course, that is, something that everybody must personally weigh out in their own hearts. But we're looking at the broader layers of this, and even Project 2025. Is this our fight? Should we engage in some way? Maybe it's not in the streets, but resistance looks different in many different ways. So should we
Yeah.
practice resistance in some way?
So yeah, resistance is much more complicated now. Certainly, the traditional African American resistance has been peaceful demonstrations. We all remember the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where the same kind of terror was unleashed upon the innocent people and peaceful people who simply wanted to walk across the bridge. Now that kind of peaceful resistance is outlawed. And so, how is it that if we now have these laws against the ways that African Americans can fight for rights, and as we roll back DEI, as the attacks on the African American existence in America is um, is abridged, then you have to wonder if they're building bigger bridges and if they are limiting the way anybody can protest against the government. How do we fight back? Should we fight back? Is this our fight? Absolutely, this is our fight. We have to be smarter. I think we need a new strategy in 2026 in the 21st century. What century are we in?
Mm-hmm.
The ways that we protest, the ways that we fight against this oppressive system that's designed to abridge our rights, to stymie our growth in America, is certainly our right. When they build a bigger cage, they're going to run out of Hispanics and they're going to want to put black people.
Mm.
We're next. And so that cage is bigger, and the cage is big enough for African Americans. And certainly putting us in that bridge, in that cage, is part of the plan.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Well, thank you, Jeff. I'm going to just take some questions right now for you, and let me see if there's any questions that we saw in the chat, or if there's anybody that just wants to ask that question that they may have right now. Anybody have a question for Jeff
Yes.
Thomas? Go, Valerie. You see one?
Yes, Pastor Manny.
Yeah.
Yes, Pastor Manny. We have a question. The question is or was there any legal challenge filed against Act 399 in state or federal courts?
The ACLU did, in fact, file something against it, but they dropped it after ACT moved out. I mean, after ICE moved out. And there were some concessions made, but by and large, Act 399 is, in fact, a law in the state of Louisiana, and nothing has changed.
Okay. Let's see. Anybody else have another question?
Mr. Waters has a question, guys.
Okay, you can read it, Betty, because I can't
Oh,
see.
he's got his hand up. If he can unmute, I think he can ask his question.
I don't have a question. I just have a proposal. Can I make my proposal?
Okay.
You can do whatever you
wait,
want,
can you
as
wait
far as
just
I'm
a minute,
concerned,
Mr.
Mr.
Waters?
Leon Watts.
Okay, can you wait just a minute? Let us. We're on the questions. Then, Pastor Manning will go back to you after the question.
All right, that's
okay,
fine.
the question is from Darlene. We have a question from Darlene. What can be done to interact with Latinos?
How can Blacks and Latinos interact, I guess is the
Yes.
question.
Yes.
Well, yeah, listen, here's another thing that's real. Blacks and Latinos work together often in New Orleans, I can tell you, in construction sites, in job sites, all across this city. And I see African Americans and Latinos working at the same kinds of levels and doing same kinds of jobs. And so I think that there's a natural bridge that's being built as people work together and come together. I see Hispanics moving into Black neighborhoods. And so I think as they become neighbors and go to school together and their kids go to school together, I think there are some natural similarities and closeness that will bring our communities together. I think ultimately we have the same battle, we have the same fight. The sooner that we recognize that we are in fact allies and not adversaries, I think that we are all better.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me move, Mr. Waters. I appreciate the fact that you have a suggestion, and certainly you have that right and have earned that, and we would need to hear that suggestion. So please share it.
Well, from my assessment of the new reactionary law that's come into being by the state, it appears to me that we should strive to unite all who can be united to defeat that law. So I would suggest, as one idea of defeating this state law, is for us to sign up as many people possible to a petition whereby at such and such time we present that to the state. A petition that's written so aggressively that identifies the state really as an enemy to the people of Louisiana. Because what has happened in Minneapolis cannot be ignored. It's coming this way. And I would argue that the current new city administration does not come across as is serious about fighting and defeating ICE. I would argue that the present new administration is conciliating in as much as the new administration, the new mayor, sleeps with a MAGA Republican. When you analyze all the $50,000 donations given to her in her campaign, they all came from the Republican Party. So anyone who is serious, I mean serious, not talking BS, but serious, understands we have a real fight on our hands. And we cannot allow what happened in Minneapolis to happen here.
Absolutely.
So that's my suggestion. Yes. And until we can build a movement that will use all legal forms of struggle, we have to see ourselves in the long run getting to a point that we will have to, at some point, transition into illegal forms of struggle.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Waters. Thank you. That well said. And we need to hear all of that. Yes, Sylvia.
Miss Marianne had her hand up for a while.
I'm going to take one more question. I'll take
With a
that from Marianne,
question.
and then I have to. Yeah, I understand. One question from Marianne, and then we have to move on to Dr.
Okay.
Rafael. Okay.
Okay.
And then I'll just give Jeff one minute to just close. Marianne.
Yeah, I was just wondering if either of you felt an attempt to reinvigorate repealing Act 399, like petitioning our New Orleans contingent to enter, create a new law. Because like Mr. Waters said, and y'all have said, is while it started with the Hispanic community, they're building cages that they have to fill in order to keep in the prison. So
Yeah. Good question. And so Jeff, yeah.
The answer would be that would be great, except that we have a hyper-partisan supermajority in the state legislature, led by a hyper-partisan governor who they are all on the same thinking. I think if every African American legislator went and proposed some bill which would counteract Act 399, it would be voted down. We just don't have the votes. And so I think to try to do it legislatively is folly. I think that we have to it would be dead in the water. We have to be forceful in the streets. It has to be a people bubbling up from the streets kind of movement. It's the only way that that's going to happen.
All right. Thank you for that, Jeff. Thank you, Mr. Waters, and thank you, Marianne, and all those who asked questions. I'm going to move on to, and thank you, Jeff, for being with us. Please stay with us if you're able to. If you're not, we totally understand. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Go move on to Dr. Rafael. Dr. Rafael, would you introduce yourself and your area of expertise? And I want to just give you 7 to 10 minutes to just talk about that, frame this in the understanding of the civil rights movement and the work that you have done, particularly around the history of Latinos in the struggle.
Thank you, Pastor Manning. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Rafael Delgadillo. I am a historian based out of the University of New Orleans. I am not a professor. I am a researcher working on an oral history project. In fact, there are a number of people who have gotten an interview that are in here right now. So I'm glad to see everybody here tonight and glad to see such a big crowd. My area of expertise is, and first of all, before I go into that, I want to acknowledge that, I'm here to ground us in the history of Latino communities in New Orleans and Louisiana. However, I want to acknowledge that, of course, Latinos are not the only people that need to be afraid of what's going on. Of course, Arab populations, Asian populations, the Somalian population in Minnesota is dealing with it heavily right now. So I want to acknowledge that, but at the same time, I am here to ground us in the history of Latino migrants in New Orleans. Of course, the largest number of migrants from any single country in Louisiana are actually from Vietnam, but Latinos as a categorical group are the largest number of migrants. Now, I do want to say that I grew up here in New Orleans, so I'm very familiar with the Latino community, or the Latino communities, as I like to say. I got my bachelor's and my master's in history from UNO, and then I went and got my PhD in Latin American and Latino studies from UC Santa Cruz, where I studied the historic connections between New Orleans and Latin America, particularly during the 19th century, but I have done research into the presence of Latinos into the 20th century. And I just want to go over some raw numbers real quick. I'm gonna try to go fast just to show you how the pace of growth for Latino communities, I think, is remarkable. It doesn't compare in scale as it does to other parts of the country. But for example, in 1850, so 176 years ago, the population of the United States was 23 million. The population of Louisiana was 516,000. And of that, 116,000 lived in New Orleans. In that census, we see that there were 405 people listed as Mexican, 1,300 from the West Indies. I suspect most of those people from Cuba, but the data is raw and we really don't have any way of telling. Now, if we speed up to 1960, 110 years later, the population of the United States is 180 million. Louisiana has 3.25 million. New Orleans has 630,000, which is the largest that the city's ever been as far as the census. And in the vicinity of New Orleans, there are 3,200 people who are identified as either Puerto Rican or Mexican. I don't know why those are the only ones that we can find, but those are recorded. Then we move up to the year 2000. There are 280 million people in the United States, 4.5 million living in Louisiana, about 485,000 in New Orleans, and in Louisiana in total, there's 107,000 Latinos living in Louisiana. We go to the most recent census of 2020. The U.S. is at 330 million. Louisiana's grown just a bit to about 4.6 million. New Orleans has shrunken because of Katrina to 360,000. Yet across the state, the population of Latinos is 322,000. So we went from 1960 having 2.5%. Oh, I'm sorry, 1% of the population was Hispanic or Latino. To today, 65 years later, it's about 7%. And again, that doesn't compare to when you talk about New York, Florida, California, Texas. I still think that the growth is remarkable considering the city's history. Now, most Latino immigrants in New Orleans are Central American. The majority of those folks tend to come from Honduras. That's due to the fruit trade. Of course, United Fruit Company, which is now Chiquita, used to be headquartered in New Orleans. There's a big history to that I don't have time to go over on that, but just be assured to know that United Fruit Company made sure that their partnership with the United States government oppressed the people of Central America so that their goods could be extracted for the global economy. That's a very broad way of putting it. There's a historic Cuban presence that goes back to the 1850s, from when Cuban refugees were fleeing Cuba to come over here, and that continued after the 1950s into the 1960s. A lot of Dominicans have been coming in since the 1970s. My family's from the Dominican Republic. Most Dominicans have been coming here due to the petrochemical industry. Shell Oil and all these other companies went out to the Caribbean and started recruiting low-wage labor in the 1970s. And that's how we get a Dominican population in Louisiana, although most of us live on the West Bank. I live in the city, but most of us grew up on the West Bank at some point or another, and that's where you'll find most people from the Dominican Republic. There's been a consistent Mexican presence, but it's grown because of the growth of laborers after Katrina. And since Katrina, there's also been a significant growth from South American communities. So we see, when we go back to the numbers, we see that there was a significant change, and there's been a pattern of growth since the 1960s. And I want to ask, what happened? What changed? Why was the 1960s such a crucial time that changed the trajectory of the demographics of this country, right? And that, for me as a historian, I look at the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, right? Before 1965, the U.S. favored immigration from Europe and put a hard cap on how many people could immigrate here from the global South, essentially. After the 1965 Immigration Act, those caps were lifted, and we saw the growth and the explosion of migrants from Latin America, but also from Asia and Africa, but particularly from Latin America. This new system emphasized family reunification, employment-based migration, and it ultimately transformed the demographics of the country. It just hasn't been the same ever since. But as many of the people in this room and who are familiar with New Orleans history know, that the United States, its legal structure was very, very different before 1965. The U.S., as we know, openly allowed discrimination. It was written into law. It was enforced by law enforcement. In the South, this was known as Jim Crow. It was particularly anti-Black. This involved lynchings, which is akin to ethnic cleansing. Latinos and Asians did deal with legal discrimination, but that was more, you see that more in Texas and in the West. So in the history of Southern Jim Crow, we don't really hear about the persecution that Latinos and Asians dealt with, but of course we had that, the Chinese Exclusion Act from the 1880s. And then some of the first civil rights cases involved with education involved Mexican American students in California and other parts of the Southwest. But what really changed this country, I would argue, is the civil rights movement, right? In 1964, and of course in this city, I would argue that the civil rights movement started after the Civil War and Reconstruction, and we see that with the evidence of the Plessy Ferguson case that emanates from here in New Orleans. But as we know, the movement culminated in the 1960s with the Civil Rights Act. Which ended legal discrimination, which was in 1964, The following year, in 1965, we had the Voting Rights Act, which outlawed voter discrimination. In 1968, we had the Fair Housing Act, which banned housing discrimination. These laws, of course, did not eliminate racism, but they did change the rules of the system. And what has this meant for Latinos? It means that, at least legally speaking, the waves of migrants that came after 1965 have had unprecedented access to jobs, public education, and political participation. I think this context really, really matters, because this unprecedented access is possible because of Black-led civil rights movement, and that is something that Latino and migrant people don't really know. It's not out of willful ignorance. It's just out of, if you move to a different country right now, you wouldn't know much of its history, even if you were able to adapt to its society and culture. And so I think we have to do a better job of educating immigrants on the history of the civil rights movement, the history of the Black struggle, so that we can identify with it, so that we can identify when we're going to be dealing with this violent white supremacy. And I want to end. I have a lot that I could say, but I'm going to end with a quick story, with a really quick story. Going back to 2004, I was in the office of my mentor and professor, Dr. Rafael. A lot of you may recognize that name, and you know why he matters in the history of the city. He was involved in civil rights movement back in the 60s, and then was one of the first Black professors at UNO. And I remember in 2004, we were reading the Times-Picayune, and back then, this was before the internet was the internet. So 4 years after the 2000 census, we finally started getting into predictions of what the demographics were going to be in the future, according to the 2000 census. And it was the first time that the census predicted that by 2040, the majority of the people in this country would not be white. And I remember Dr. Casimir, who was born in 1942, he looked at that and he said, "Oh, no, they're not going to like that." And I said, "What do you mean, Doc?" He said, "White folks, they're not going to like that." I said, "Well, what do you think they're going to do?" And he said, "Oh, I don't know, but they're going to do something." And here we are 22 years after I had that conversation with this man, and he was completely right. I didn't know how much that would, affect us at this time. I didn't know how much it would affect the migrant community. I'm not surprised that it is affecting our community. But I guess that's really the one thing I want us to understand, is that we really need to make sure that this country, not just migrants, but everybody, understands the history of the civil rights movement, why it was important, and why it's relevant to us today. Thank you.
Yeah, that was powerful. And I'll take some questions in just a moment, but what resonates with me, a couple of things. You said that the Latin community does not understand, or is not educated, or has not been privy to the history and understanding the great work and struggle of African Americans during the civil rights movement to get to be able to, so that they're able to enjoy, and all of us are able to enjoy the freedoms, especially Latinos, that they have today in this country. And we have to do a better job of educating, and that tells us too, not only we, but we have to fight for a school system that is going to do that. And that takes us to a whole nother issue, but we have to make sure that we can freely teach about that history. And then, you touched on, lastly, what we call, what they call it, replacement theory, or that white folks are ultimately afraid of being replaced, and no longer being the majority, and we see that happening. And so we must go down to the roots of what this is all being stemmed from. Well, certainly. Thank you, Dr. Rafael. Let me just see if there's some questions for you that other people might have. Any questions? Valerie might have stepped away. Let me just ask.
Yeah, it is Sylvia. Miss Darlene have her hand up.
Okay, there is someone that needs to mute their phone, if they would, please.
Miss Darlene have her hand up.
Go ahead, Miss Darlene.
Good evening, everyone. A few thoughts and questions. In order to educate people, as far as the discussion on the immigrants are concerned, you have to be interested in the subject matter that is being presented. it is true that Blacks and Hispanics do work side by side on a lot of industry here in New Orleans. But how many times have you actually seen Blacks and Hispanics interacting with each other on a social level? I noticed that the majority of Latinos that I have come in contact with identify as white, and they don't even identify as Latino, they identify as white. In order to, it seems to me, what I find, that in order for them um, to make this more concrete, it's like they've made some kind of group decision to deliberately not befriend or interact socially with the Black people of New Orleans. Personally, I've tried all kinds of ways to interact with Latinos practically all over the city, but right in my own neighborhood, especially. There's a building there that with 4 or 5 apartments, and it's all Hispanic. And I have gone, I have even delivered them ice and food and checked up on them after hurricanes. And when the ice thing started right here, I delivered handwritten messages to them saying that if they needed anything, if they needed someone to go to the grocery, if they need any help, to contact me, and I would be willing to be there and to help them. I've even learned Spanish, and they are very polite, but they are not friendly, and they do not want to be friends.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Darlene. Dr. Rafael, you want to make some comments about that?
Well, first, Ms. Darlene, I want to thank you for the efforts that you've made to be in community with people around you, even if they're different. I think that's a big part of it. Your frustration, I can understand it, where it comes from. I think the answers to your questions and concerns they can be various and dynamic. I will say this, that it's important for us to understand that, you know, 1619 is the year that slavery was introduced and what is to now the United States, right? My family's from the Dominican Republic. We had slavery back in 1519, right? We had a racial caste system, much actually more complicated than one in the US. But I mentioned all that to say that in Latin America, we already have race and racism. We already have our these racial constructs. So when you get Latinos that identify as white, it's because they've always identified as white. They just happen to be from a Latin American country. I identify as Black because I'm of African ancestry, and I grew up in this city, and I got reminded every day that I was Black in positive ways, right? Um, so we got to understand that Latinos come from 21 different countries. The most of us are going to be white, Black, indigenous, or some mixture of each to varying degrees. When it comes to building bonds, with other groups, what I found through my own life and through the research I do is that first generation is always going to be hard to penetrate. But when when they start having kids and their kids start going to school and they have to, mingle and make community with other groups, that's when you really start seeing those bonds forming and that communal aspect forming. Here in New Orleans, because we've had several waves of migration over the last 60 years, you're going to have some areas where I think that those possibilities of community building and coalition building are going to be easier than in others. But I do believe that the challenges that are frustrating Miss Darlene are going to be with us for a while. And it's about patience, and it's also about figuring out. For me, I try to figure out how to bring this education to people. This is something that Rachel Tabor and I talk about with Unión Migrante, is how to bring this sort of information and education to our community. So it takes effort. I think your frustrations are justified. I hope I've answered, or at least been able to give you a quality response, because I think your frustrations are justified, and trust me, I sense them too.
All right. Thank you for that question, darling. Thank you, Dr. Rafael, for that answer as well, too. And I think we have to keep in mind the ultimate scheme and strategy is divide and conquer. Well, when it comes to seeing who and what the true enemy is, divide and conquer and keep them all scrambling, I think is at the core of the strategy. I'll take one more question if anybody has it for Dr. Rafael. Any other questions?
In Minneapolis, there's already
Alice, were you trying to ask a question?
fake ads stuff. Fake video.
There
I
is
see some.
there is a phone that needs to be muted. Was there another question?
No, that's
Okay.
actually, you know what? I'm so sorry. That's me.
Okay.
I'm gonna mute
I
myself.
thought I
That's-
recognized that voice. I thought that was
Yes,
Sam.
you did. That's the
all right.
the
Okay.
background.
Didn't see any
Okay.
more questions, Pastor.
Okay. Very good.
Marsha
Thank you,
Cook had a
Doctor.
hand up.
Who
Oh,
did?
wait, Belinda Parker Brown.
Go ahead,
I'm
Sister
sorry.
Belinda.
Yes, good evening. My question is that have anyone mentioned about the $75 billion that ICE is their budget?
No, we had not talked about that, and certainly, I think we're going to get to that, talking about ways that we can get engaged right now to contact our congressmen in order to say, look, we must not support ICE in any way going forward. We need you to stand up against any federal funding of ICE as we know it right now. And so,
Yeah, that is scary, Pastor.
Yeah.
That's very scary that they're dumping that much money into this operation. So
we must. Yeah, if people need to call the congressman, show up at the congressman's office, make a phone call, we have to let them know that it is not in our best interest in order that ICE continue to be funded. Dr. Rafael, any final thoughts before we move on to our next panelist?
No, thank you very much for the opportunity to appear here. I think Old Democrat may have their hand up.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
Yes.
A lady going as Old Democrat.
I got you.
Yeah, my name is Marcia Cook. I want to thank Reverend Manning for saying something that I, as a white person, that motivates me to be a part of this group and as many other groups as I can connect with. And that's the whole divide and conquer thing. That's what this is all about. Let's blame our problems on this group or that group. And we all know that when you take rights away from one group, ultimately you're going to try to take it away from every group. We have to join hands and hearts and fight this.
Amen. Thank you, Marcia. Thank you so much, Ms. Marcia. I appreciate that comment. Old Democrat, I should say. Thank you so much. Dr. Rafael, thank you. Please stay with us. We're going to move now to Rachel Tabor. Rachel, I want you to introduce yourself, your work for those who don't know you. I know many, many, many people do know you and the wonderful work that you're a part of along with your group. But please tell us, and then tell us what the situation is right now with the Latin community here in the city of New Orleans, and how many are dealing with it in terms of work, in terms of school, in terms of this being able to maneuver at this time. So, hey, and thank you for being here with us, Rachel.
Oh, it's my absolute honor and pleasure to be here with every one of y'all, and to follow Dr. Rafael, who's also a beloved member and activist with Unión Mirante like myself. Can y'all hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. So I'm a volunteer activist with Unión Mirante, which is the only democratically led immigrant rights organization led for and by undocumented activists in New Orleans. And I myself am not an immigrant nor undocumented. It's my pleasure to join y'all as someone who has language access and the ability to be speaking with y'all right now. And I also feel that this fight, and I resonate with what our last speaker just said too, that we can't let ourselves be divided and conquered. And with what so many of you all have raised, which is that this is not just one community under attack. This is our entire democracy under attack. One thing that I really want to elevate is that racist policing is the crisis, and that is nothing new in Louisiana or in this country. The Border Patrol have left to, continue their reign of terror in a more focused way in Minneapolis. But the real reign of terror is the Kenner Police's 287G agreement. I'm actually at the Yenny building right now. That's why I'm joining y'all from my car, where we just met with some elected officials. We're trying to walk back what's called a 287G agreement, whereby our local law enforcement are authorized to work as ICE. And by the numbers, more people have been arrested, detained, deported because of the Kenner Police collaborating directly with ICE than by the Border Patrol in all of the history of Louisiana combined. And it is rampant racial profiling. It is people being stopped by the color of their skin. And, and I think this is a really familiar story to many on this call. I mean, more so than it is to me, oh, a broken tail light, oh, whatever, and then you're stopped, you're profiled, you're harassed by police. And we have seen even citizens turned into ICE custody in Kenner. We have seen even passengers in cars, being interrogated about their immigration status. And we are fighting on the offensive where this is already in place in Kenner, and we're trying to get rid of it. And we're also trying to defend New Orleans in the wake of the sunsetting of the consent decrees for our local law enforcement, for our police, and for our jails. And I think we all intuitively know, and also concretely, these issues are connected. The consent decrees that came to exist in New Orleans because of the extreme police violence on the Danziger Bridge, and because our local law enforcement have been weaponized too often against communities of color. We had these checks and balances in place, that not only, provided some protections for all New Orleanians, but also did not allow our local law enforcement to collaborate, to ask about immigration status. If you get if you are driving without a license in New Orleans, you get a ticket, you don't get arrested and turned over to ICE. And, if you're in the jail, let's say you got in a bar fight or you did something you shouldn't have done, we don't need a death sentence for misdemeanors. We literally, what we call what's going on in Kenner, traffic court with a death sentence. And it's not an exaggeration. I know two families I can name right now that are personal friends, that their loved one was stopped for, broken taillight, out of state plates, a minor little traffic infraction. The dad was arrested by the Kenner Police, turned over to ICE, deported. And we all know that there's a higher law, right? The law of family is sacred, right? And there's no law in this world that could keep us from our children that we love. And there are many parents, hardworking immigrant parents who've been here for years, paying taxes, contributing, and they want a better life for their families and for their kids, and it's not safe in the countries where they came from, in large part because of U.S. invasions, as Dr. Delgadillo mentioned. And so their kids are here, and they'll do anything to come back to them, even if that means re-entry and breaking the law again. Well, I know two dads where one was trying to come back after deportation, and he died in the desert trying to cross the border, and the other's body has never even been found. They've never been able to lay their loved one to rest. And so it's not hyperbole to say that when police work with ICE, that is how serious the stakes are. And not only that, I mean, never being able to hug your child again because of a traffic infraction, never being able to children growing up alone without their parents, is not the way to solve crime. We need to solve crime at its root through, dignified jobs and healthcare and accessible rents and, street lights and youth programs and so many things, not over policing that harms all of our communities. So there's so much to talk about on this issue. I mean, yes, the Border Patrol occupation was traumatic and horrendous in a way that I think I've never seen. I've heard so many people just this evening directly to their elected officials tell them that this was more heart-wrenching than the pandemic, more heart-wrenching than all the hurricanes they've survived. That in Kenner, people are afraid to leave their homes. They're living in basically house arrest. For me, I work as an interpreter, and it's heart-wrenching to hear people. You hear their asylum stories, and you hear the conditions they fled, on the brink of dictatorship in their countries of origin, being hunted by secret police. And yet here they are again, unable to leave their homes in Kenner, being hunted by the police. And what can we do? Well, there's much that we
Rachel,
can
Rachel, Rachel, let me ask this real quick though, so people understand, because I think people are not seeing ICE prevalent in New Orleans proper, but is ICE still just as prevalent in Kenner, or has it died down? What is the status right now?
That's a great question. So I'm so glad you asked that, because there is the kind of pain that goes viral on TikTok and on the news cycle. And then there's this like slow, torturous drip. I think we see it in our communities. Not every time one of our African American community members' rights are violated by police makes the news, but it's a constant, right? And the Border Patrol was an occupation of 250 officers that was horrific. Every day of the week, they were out racially profiling. They were stopping people at grocery stores, at Home Depot corners, at children's bus stops, in the parking lots of hospitals. Absolutely heartless and horrific. The Border Patrol is no longer on such a rampage in our area in Louisiana. We don't know if or when they may come back. We're sort of at the whims of this insane federal system right now. But ICE has been here, and ICE continues here. And it's scary because ICE has seen a tripling of its budget. The entire military of Russia has as much funds as ICE. And this is just one branch. And this is what our taxes are going to, instead of our children's schools, instead of repairing our streets, instead of 1,000 other worthy causes we can all think of. And so there's an increase in the ICE budget, and that is terrifying. But what is even more terrifying to me is the way that our local law enforcement, who are sworn to serve and protect, not separate and deport, right? Who are here allegedly to help prevent crime, are being turned into an extension of ICE. It is vampirical. It is much more dangerous, in fact. And it doesn't always go viral on TikTok. And we're not all out there with our whistles because, well, it's just a law enforcement officer. It could just be a ticket. But that's not what it is to immigrant families. Williams Boulevard, which was a vibrant, economic powerhouse in Kenner, is seeing tons of business closed. Children are not going to school. And so it's a both and. The Border Patrol is not here at the level that they were, but the crisis is not over. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, it does, because we know that the way any oppressor works is by instilling absolute fear that terrorizes and limits people, and whether they're there or not, they in much of a capacity as they were. That what they've done is they've put this immense fear in people so that they are afraid to come out of their homes, as you said, send their kids to school, go to their businesses, even go to the hospital if they're sick, and get the health care that they need. And so that sort of fear has got people just absolutely paralyzed and afraid to maneuver. So that's part of the.
You're absolutely right. And it is the normalization of racial hatred through institutions such as our local law enforcement. We are like a frog in boiling water. It's been boiling. And it breaks my heart to see more people who were peacefully protesting losing their lives. And it's not unrelated to thousands of other people who have lost their police to state violence. Their lives to state violence by the police, or the thousands who have lost their lives in ICE custody. And so I want to focus on what we can do. I really want to honor that's immediately where Mr. Waters went, and I love that, and I'm with that. I always say that our rights are like muscles. The more we use them, the stronger they get. And if we don't use them, we will lose them forever. And I, too, am terrified of Act 399, of SB 15. And I also believe that we, the people, we have a saying in Oño Mirante, which I'll say it in Spanish and I'll translate it. Solo el pueblo salva al pueblo. Only the people save the people. We keep us safe. Only we, the people, have our backs. We have seen politicians kowtow to this wannabe dictatorship. We have seen businesses sell out. We have seen even universities, kind of kowtow. but the people in the streets who are peacefully filming are not standing for this. And it is all of God's beautiful rainbow of people who are out there doing this. So there are many ways that we can resist. Throughout the entire Border Patrol occupation, I was really active training people who are citizens without a criminal record who are less at risk filming ICE and police, because being a peaceful witness is absolutely essential. And I think I'll speak from my own experience. I've never been so radicalized about how violent police are until I began filming them, and how violent ICE are until I began filming them. When you call this system into question, it rears its ugly head. And so I think it's important that we stand together as a community and peacefully film and witness. More importantly, and I'm seeing some of the comments and I'm just like absolutely resonating with what y'all are saying. How do we have a $300 million deficit in our New Orleans schools, and yet our city council and our mayor and our sheriff cannot commit that we will not be collaborating with ICE? I mean, I understand we have Act 399 and SB 15 and those things are scary, but we also have a valid legal argument that we don't have an additional budget to be doing ICE's work. Why would we divert our law enforcement when we have actual crime that harms people to be solving and actual jobs to be doing? I think there are a lot of strategies where we can at least slow walk these things rather than just serve our community up on a plate. And I have to be honest, I'm very concerned that Chief of Police Ann Kirkpatrick is not doing enough to resist. Michelle Woodfork is brand new. I'm excited to see what she may bring to the table, but we're trying to bring the solutions to our local elected officials and say, hey, we the people of New Orleans don't want our tax money going to ICE. We don't want to do ICE's work. We have better ways that we can eliminate crime, because let's be honest, when law enforcement works with ICE, I personally have had to accompany a mom whose child was molested in Kenner because she was too terrified to go to the Kenner police on her own because she was afraid that she would be deported. And she needed to be here for her daughter who'd gone through so much. And we are all less safe when our local law enforcement collaborate with ICE. Not only that, it's not the right use of our tax money. We have other things that we can be investing in. And so we have a letter that we're circulating. I believe Deborah put it in the comments, that we are calling on, if you're part of a church, if you're part of a social aid and pleasure club, a sorority, your band, your neighborhood association, we're calling on people to bring together their institutions to sign this letter. Because when we stand together behind our institutions, I always say there's two things any politician cares about. Doesn't matter their party, their gender, or if they're right or wrong. It's money and votes. We don't tend to have a lot of money, among Unión Mirante members, and so we got to get those votes. We got to get our institutional power, and we can stand together as a community to do that. And there have been incredible folks who've come out to help their neighbors throughout this hard time, but this hard time is not over. We need to make our city not just a place of resistance during crises, but a place that year-round is safe for everyone in so many ways. And so we ask you to sign the letter. Some other ways that you can support, we're fundraising for a recovery fund for families that, there are people who are just returning to work who literally were living in hiding since November because of this extreme occupation and enforcement by the Border Patrol. And, people are on the brink of eviction. So we are doing some funding of direct relief, but it's also a vehicle for us to get people talking about how do we make our elected officials be more accountable on this issue. So Deborah will be sharing that in the link as well. There's actually a training on it Tuesday at First Grace, one of our beloved congregations of so many that have signed on and have supported to raise their voices with our local elected officials. We train people to peacefully film ICE and police throughout New Orleans. That's something that we need to keep doing. The state troopers are a threat to all the people of New Orleans. These high-speed chases put all of our lives at risk. And, the way that they're using camera, facial recognition, and plate readers without warrants, disproportionately harms people of color. The state troopers who are an occupying force are asking people about their immigration status. There's so many issues where we can all stand together. And then finally, if you'd like to kind of get to know some of your Hispanic community members more, we invite y'all every first Tuesday of the month from 6 to 8 at First Grace, which is at Norman C. Francis and Canal, right across from Entergy. We have Know Your Rights trainings. They happen in Spanish. We're teaching our neighbors about the Constitution because that is the supreme law of the land. It doesn't matter your skin color. It doesn't matter where you were born. We all will fight to make that piece of paper valid. And so, we train people on their rights. And you can come, meet your neighbors, learn Spanish. Doesn't matter if you don't speak a lick of Spanish. We can put you to work helping with security, helping with IDs, helping with childcare. It's a nice place to kind of see the community, feel the community, get involved. And then we even have all kinds of tasks folks can join in on. I'll share, or maybe Deborah will share the link to our WhatsApp chat. We use WhatsApp. It's what a lot of people use internationally. But we have a group called English Language Allies. You're most invited to join there, whether you're passionate about art or graphic design, or you might be interested to help sign off on the paperwork to sign a bond for someone to help them get out of jail. We have roles for you, and we'd love to bring you in.
Excellent, Rachel. Thank you so much for all the work that you do and for educating us. You might have put it in the chat already, but if not, please tell everybody how they can get a hold of you and reach out to you or anyone connected to you if they so choose.
And we invite you to the training this Tuesday. And then also we have a Bigger Allies training coming up. So Deborah will be sharing those and I'll share them too. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate it. Always good to see you. All right. Wait, let me just take any questions that anybody may have for Rachel. Any questions for Rachel?
Miss Lane had a question. She had her hand up.
Yeah, Rachel, you mentioned that at the very outset of your talk that that you had recently met to try to walk back the 287G agreement that our NOPD signed. Can you tell us more about that? And also, Jeff, did you write about that?
Go ahead, Rachel. Rachel?
Rachel's frozen. I did not write about it, but that's something that we are looking at. And I think Rachel brought up a good point that, I'm concerned about the NOPD's acceptance of, I guess we have to accept state law, city law or subservient to state laws, but that we would have some resistance seems to me to be par for the course, I would think, particularly given the fact that we have laws which are different from state laws, like the way we deal with marijuana. It's decriminalized on a local level, but in state level, it's still a crime. So we can do things locally that can impact the way the NOPD interacts with ICE. ICE. We should not have to be an arm of ICE. The NOPD should not be an arm of ICE. But I have not seen them. I still see ICE. I got to tell you guys, we're working on a big project out in New Orleans East, and we still see them driving up and down Chef-Ventura Highway, Bullard, Crowder. They are still in town, and they are still doing little searches. In fact, there was a chase not too long ago. So ICE is still in New Orleans, but I have not seen NOPD help them. But they certainly have a policy that they are an arm of ICE, and that is concerning to me. But go ahead, Rachel.
And I just want to add to that. I'm so sorry, my phone overheated, but I'm glad you were able to jump in. So yes, I also have not seen the NOPD collaborating with ICE of late, and I think that's a wonderful fruit of years of movement and organizing by many people, even on this call, and that's why we need to keep that up. Unfortunately, it's like this perfect storm. We have the most anti-immigrant governor, who I want to remind everyone, I'll put it in the chat, that Governor Landry's own family seafood business could not operate without undocumented laborers being exploited. He has human trafficking charges in his own family seafood business. And this man wants to exploit immigrant workers on one hand, and on the other hand, he wants to put them back at Angola. And we all know what that means. When they say make America great again, they may as well say make America plantation economy great for white landowning men only again, because that's what these evil men mean. And he has Liz Morrell, the attorney general, like his thirsty, rabid little lapdog, attacking the consent decrees, attacking, Judge Susie Morgan of the Fifth Circuit Court just sunset our consent decrees, which means they're going to be phased out in the coming years, leaving us stranded. Previously we had this federal lawsuit, with the separation of the branches of government. So it was in the judicial branch, and it was also federal as opposed to local. So it was actually kind of protecting us. But now that bastion against the storm that we had, we're hanging by a thread. And so unless we can really mobilize our local elected officials, we're not seeing NOPD work with ICE. We want to keep it that way, and we need to raise our voices and get them on board. And it may be challenging because of attacks like 399 and SB 15. Some ideas that we're proposing is like, well, how about you report publicly on a website every time if you do collaborate with ICE, so that we can all see that it wasn't murderers and terrorists and pedophiles, but in fact people with parking tickets, people with, who got in a bar fight and they shouldn't have, right? Because, and I want to remind people that, like, I always tell people, like, Jesus was an immigrant. Jesus was wrongly accused. It's important for us to have a merciful restorative justice system and not allow our police, to be an extension of criminalizing people and separating families, whatever their origin.
Yes, and just to touch on, NOPD and the sheriff's office participating with ICE or assisting ICE, we must let our public officials know that we are not happy with their silence, that we will not tolerate them being indifferent about this. This is not a time when we can afford for them not to be outspoken. This issue is too critical. Lives are at stake in this. People are dying because of this. We must insist that our council people, that our sheriff, that our chief of police become more vocal and standing up against ICE and what's happening all throughout this city. So let's make our voices known. Thank you, Rachel. I've got to move on to our last speaker, which is Angela Davis, who's going to tell us more about some ways that we can help and some things she knows about. Angela, thank you and welcome and thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's good to be with y'all and hear other people speak. So I'm Angela. I work at First Grace Community Alliance out of First Grace United Methodist Church. And we have two programs. One is Hagar's House. It's a home for women and children and trans and gender nonconforming folks. And the other is Project Ishmael, a children's immigration legal program that has three goals. One is to meet some of the immigration needs of children in New Orleans. The other is to meet some of the legal needs of folks who live at Hagar's House, usually by coordinating volunteers who do legal work other than immigration. And the third is to challenge systemic injustice that allows children and their parents to be harassed, incarcerated, deported, torn from their families based on race or immigration status. The majority of our time at Project Ishmael is directly representing children, sometimes their parents in their immigration cases. Right now, we represent a little over 100 children and youth in their cases. Most of the kids that we work with qualify for something called special immigrant juvenile status, which is for children who've been abandoned, abused, or neglected by one or both of their parents, and who've gone to juvenile court, and juvenile court has said it's not in their best interest to return to their home country. Other folks might qualify for something called a U visa if they've been a victim of a crime in the United States, or a T visa if they've been a victim of trafficking, asylum, and other types of cases. I share all that to say all of these cases usually take, if somebody's not detained, 5 or 10 or more years. We've worked with a lot of youth who are now in their early 20s who we met in middle school. So when folks say, why don't people come the right way? One, there's often not, that often doesn't exist. And two, even when the system works, it's very, very slow and hard and usually expensive. There aren't many free resources for folks, especially in New Orleans or in Louisiana, where we have the second most people detained in the whole United States outside of Texas. And ICE has detained and arrested. The dog just went crazy. Apologies. So ICE has targeted and arrested several of our young clients as well, even with cases pending, even with winning cases pending. Sorry, the dog. Some of the other stuff work that we do is provide resource coordination and consults family safety planning, which looks like a lot of parents make plans for their children in case the parent is taken or detained or deported and the child like comes home from school and a parent's not there. They might fill out a power of attorney form. Um, Advocacy and accompaniment. We used to host workshops and free legal consults and run smaller events. Now we try to send the folks who work at our office to the Unión Migrante monthly consults. They have this whole system set up. So if you're able to volunteer, it's great. You just show up and do whatever the thing is that you're able to do.
Angela, real quick, and for those who don't know, just to educate, what exactly is accompaniment?
Yeah. It can mean a lot of things. Um,
Going with to the grocery store, to the
oh, yeah. We
what's
have
going?
not been accompanying anybody to the grocery store, but so during December when the extras, so CBP and ICE are always here, and they've been terrorizing people under every president, under every administration. But when the extra 250 CBP officers were here, accompaniment looked like we had a child who needed to get a medical exam for an immigration application. And so it might be going to the doctor's office with them. Before December, it might be going to the Social Security office because people were nervous to navigate any government office. Something else we do, but it's is accompany some of our clients or their parents to ICE or ISAP check-ins. That's it's very high risk, and we don't do that unless we've really talked it out and someone has decided that going is in their family's best interest. ICE folks know what that is. ISAP is a private company several blocks over. Both are in St. Rose, Louisiana, past the airport. ISAP is contracted. It's a GEO group org that tracks people and puts ankle bracelets. It's called Alternatives to Detention, and it's contracted out by ICE. So a lot of parents of our clients, some of our clients after they're 18, will get ankle bracelets so that immigration can track them always. They'll have apps on their phone and ISAP via ICE can call anytime and they have to answer the phone. So a lot of parents have lost their jobs because they also might have to go to an appointment once a week or once every 2 weeks, or be home for 12-hour stretches in case ISAP or ICE decides to come visit, or ISAP. So for some people, we go to those with them. We don't have volunteers going to those appointments. That's not a volunteer role we have. But did that answer your question about the accompaniment?
Yeah, that did, and unfortunately, I'm coming to the time that we have to begin to wrap it up. And so, can you and I'm sorry, I left you with so little time because of going over. So, didn't mean to short you on that. But if you could just give, I don't know if you shared in the chat already, Angela, but ways in which people could contact you or contact anybody else who they want to step in and be of support in any way.
Sure.
What and maybe what is the greatest need, if there was one?
Other folks have said a lot, but can I say two things? One, I think abolish ICE and push to abolish it. I think a lot of folks in Congress, especially Democrats, are starting to talk about altering it or getting funding to train ICE. ICE didn't exist until 2003. We don't need it. Its only purpose is to enforce racism. So abolish it completely. And the other is like so many folks said, connecting the struggles from Palestinian liberation to Black Lives Matter to immigration, like connecting. Yeah.
That's powerful. That's very powerful. Thank you so much. Wise, wise words. Thank you, Angela. And I apologize. I don't have any time for any questions for you. But I really, I appreciate your work so much. Always appreciate standing in solidarity with all that you do. And so I'm very grateful that you are here tonight with Justice and Beyond in this forum, and look forward to talking with you more. But everybody, listen, we want to take the time now for any announcements as we begin to close, so that anybody can be aware of any way that things, upcoming events or actions, or phone calling campaigns or visits to representatives or congressman's office, prayer vigils, whatever. It's your time to say it now. Let me start by saying on Wednesday here at Broadmoor Community Church, where I am pastor, we will be having a prayer vigil in remembrance of those that have been assaulted by ICE, murdered by ICE, specifically remembering Alex Preddy and Renee Good, but all of those that have been harmed by ICE. We will be remembering at a prayer vigil here at Broadmoor Community Church, 2021 South Capri, 6:00 p.m. on Wednesday. Hope that you will join us for that. Any other announcements at this time?
This is Betty DeMarco. I don't have an announcement, but I do have two things related to this that I want to comment about. Justice and Beyond reached out to Moreno's office about the press conference that she had weeks ago, demanding to know who was being arrested, what were the charges. We tried 3 different times to talk to the person we were told that could give us that information, and they would not return calls or return emails. So that was a little alarming for me. And then to hear Jeff, I think it was Jeff, talk about his thoughts about why Moreno was being so careful about commenting on any of this. It may not have been Jeff, and I apologize if it was not, but I'm a little concerned by the fact that the police department and the mayor, and I would ask everyone to write your city council people and demand that an answer be given. The second thing I wanted to say was, I heard yesterday that the government attorney general was saying they would get out of Minnesota if they would turn over their voting records. I heard today someone here in Louisiana talking about the fact that the attorney general here is being told she has to turn over all of our voting records. I think it's something that we should be calling each one of our legislators in the state about, and demanding that our information is not turned over to the feds. There is absolutely no reason for the federal government to know anything about me concerning voting in Louisiana. Anyway, I'm sorry to go on about that, but I wanted to warn you about both those things.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Betty. And so you all know we will be discussing these things in our pillars meeting. Anybody who wants to be a part of the planning of Justice and Beyond, you can contact one of the pillars, who we call them pillars because we hold up Justice and Beyond and make these things happen. But we'd love to hear, have more pillars who want to give their time and expertise to making this organization happen. Any other announcements? Anybody have any announcements about upcoming events?
I just want to, this is Lane. I just want to remind people, if you want to track, if you want to save the information, and there's quite a lot of it in the chat, links to articles and links to other information and contact information, go in your Zoom, in the chat window, there are 3 dots. For some of you, they're at the top. For others of you, it's at the bottom. And save the chat. And that will automatically save the entire contents of the chat into a file on your computer. You can find it under the directory for Zoom. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Lane, for that information. Any other
Yeah.
announcements about upcoming events?
Yes,
Yeah.
there will be a meet and greet form mixture for the candidates that's running a special election coming Thursday, the 29th. So everyone is invited. The time is 6 o'clock at Household of Faith in the East. You are invited. I will give it to Just Beyond. Hopefully, Just Beyond will put on a social media page and spread this information out for the candidates that's running for the special election. It's Thursday at 6 o'clock at Household of Faith. Thank you.
All right. And early voting is right now, isn't it?
Yep.
Well, it's suspended
Yes, it's
today.
open
It starts resumes
right.
tomorrow.
Resumes
Correct.
tomorrow. Okay. Very
And
good. All right.
Reverend Manning, one quick
Yes.
thing. This is Andrenica.
Hey, Andrenica.
How you doing? The New Orleans African American Collective Movement is having its kickoff meeting on Wednesday, January 28th, 5:30 to 8 at Dillard University. We are kicking off with housing.
Oh, good.
Of course you are.
Yes. Tell us again.
Kiana, you have that down, baby?
Say it one more time, Andrenica.
The New Orleans African American Collective Movement, the Empowerment Network. A lot of you have been participating in those meetings over the last year to talk about, the village approach. And we're starting in New Orleans East with working with community, but we're kicking off on the topic of the first general meeting around housing. It's going to be Wednesday, January 28th from 5:30. Doors open at 5:30. The event starts at 6 at Dillard University's Professional Schools and Sciences building. I will put a link in the chat.
All right. Can you text that to me too, please?
Yeah, I'm about to ask her to text me too. Text me too, Andrenica.
All right, I'll send this to y'all right now.
All right.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. All right. Any other announcements before we close?
I got one. I got two. We have a training for people who are looking to build organizing skills to do either fundraising or getting their community groups to sign on to the letters to our elected officials tomorrow, Tuesday. Oh my God, I don't even know the date. But at 6 o'clock, we're going to be at Community Unitarian at 6931 Fleur de Lis Boulevard. We'll put it in the chat. So that should be a great opportunity. And then this Saturday, at 1 o'clock, we're having a training at First Grace, 3401 Canal, also related to just how people can be allies with the immigrant community in this moment of mass, expansion of police forces and of ICE against immigrants and against all communities. So we hope you can join us Saturday or Tuesday or both.
Somebody put February the 3rd by the church that she just mentioned. Devereaux.
February, that's right. That's totally right. February the 3rd is our next Know Your Rights training in Spanish. That's another opportunity. You can come any first Tuesday to First Grace from 6 to 8, and you're going to find a whole community of Spanish speakers there providing support to people, and we would love to plug y'all in.
Amen.
All right, very good. Very good. All right, everybody. There's any critical announcements that anybody needs to make. I am 7 minutes over time. I try my best so that we can get done at 6:30. But listen, Justice and Beyond will be having monthly forums. We're going to alternate between being in person and being on Zoom. So the next time we meet will be next month, and it will be in person, most likely here at Broadmoor Community Church in our multi-purpose room. And so with that said, listen, as we go our ways, be kind to each other, love each other, be compassionate, help each other as much as we can. Listen, learn, be attentive, and remember, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And let's stand strong and resilient, and we will not walk in fear. We will not be moved. And so we continue and as we leave, I pray a blessing upon each family, everyone's finances, everyone's health in this space, everyone's well-being, that you would be guarded and protected from all hurt, harm, and danger. Amen. God bless you all. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night. Thank you for the information.
Thank you.
Good night. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks, Richard, for organizing.
Good night, everybody. Be safe.
Good night.
Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, everybody.